When you want long-term solutions, when you want deliverance, prepare for a fight. Okay, let me repeat this. If you want long-term solutions, if you want deliverance, prepare for a fight. That's the way it goes. If you want relief, you can get relief easily by taking some drugs, going to the club, or looking for a boyfriend or girlfriend to relax yourself, so-called. Or you can go into religious activity. But that's just relief. When you want deliverance, you want long-term solutions, you're going to face a fight. Sometimes even multiple fights. Let me explain why. Every paranormal stronghold out there, it can only remain in existence because it's maintained. So there are, there are stakeholders of that paranormal stronghold. So people have an interest in maintaining that stronghold. If that stronghold would dissolve, it would frustrate the interest of many people. That's why dealing with the strongholds directly is taboo. Okay, let me give an example now. Let's say you have a guy called Henry. I'm just picking up a name now. Henry is 22 and he just spent a year in prison for some minor crimes. And in jail, Henry realized, okay, now he wants things to be different. So when he's out of jail, he looks for deliverance. He doesn't want to go to fortune tellers because before he went to jail, he went to fortune tellers. Fortune tellers helped him to commit crimes and to deceive people, but it didn't work out that well. So Henry now wants the root of the issue dealt with. So Henry goes into prayer. He goes to believers, and believers pray on his behalf. And believers target the strongman. And the paranormal stronghold is broken down. It is. Shortly afterwards, Henry is looking for a job. Because he has a record, he knows that probably people would reject him from getting a job because most employers don't want people with a record working for them. One day, Henry received a mail, a physical mail from one of a business he applied for when he was in his teenage years, and they offered him a job, a full-time job. So Henry went there, and he didn't even have to go through a job interview. He just got a job. The manager told him that they got a good report of him, so they took him at the job. And Henry was thinking, all right. Henry began to work. Henry got his own apartment. And normally, if you're released from prison, you need to go to, I don't know how to, in diverse English countries call it different. Maybe in England they call it different, in US they call it different, anyway, it's like a rehabilitation center that you need to, in order for you to be socialized again in society. Now, Henry went to 2 meetings. When he went for the third, the people asked him what he was doing there. He said, well, I served 1 year in prison and I need to go to the rehabilitation center as an ex-convict. So they went through the files, but they couldn't find any files of him spending time in prison. And people began to think he was confused, so they called the police on him, saying that the guy had mental issues, and, well, the police came and took Henry away. It was not an arrest. They just thought he was a man with mental dysfunction. And Henry was thinking, hold on a minute, I've served a year in prison, what the heck? So Henry began to inform at his former lawyer, and the lawyer told him that for some reason the state erased his crime record. For some reason, and the lawyer told him that the lawyer was not permitted to speak too much about the case. And the lawyer even told him not to call him anymore. So Henry did that. He didn't call that lawyer anymore. What has happened here? The stronghold was dealt with. But there's another thing. Because the stronghold was dealt with and things were now working out in Henry's favor, there is a catch here. The expectations of others that want to keep seeing him as that crooked criminal is now frustrated. Because shortly after the believers prayed for Henry, and Henry believed also, Henry also operated by walking in faith. Walking by faith, I mean. Henry got a job, and people began to hear, what? Henry was an ex-convict who broke into some houses and who even robbed a store. He has a job at a financial institution now. How's this possible? So after that happened, people began to call Henry's new employer and to talk about Henry's past. So when the employer began to call, when the employer calls the municipality and calls the, the police, there was no record. I mean, obviously the records were there, but they couldn't find it. So the people that began to call against Henry, they felt a bit embarrassed. Also the people that Henry had robbed, I mean the store owners, they were thinking, what the heck is this? Now here's the bigger picture. Henry, while being a teenager, his parents turned against him because the parents had their issues they were working out. And the parents really wanted to divorce, but they couldn't find an excuse to divorce. They began now to blame Henry for them being together. And this had an effect on Henry. And one day Henry malfunctioned because of the tensions. And there were people that thought he said something that a teacher thought was inappropriate. And a lot of people disliked him because of it. And all those people began to murmur and murmur and murmur against him. All of this contention built up. And a paranormal thick cloud began to surround Henry. This caused Henry to drop out of high school because he couldn't function there anymore. After he dropped out of high school, that thick cloud around him attracted the wrong crowd, and he ended up participating in criminal activities. Now Henry took responsibility for what he did, those 4 crimes that he committed. Henry took responsibility, but what Henry was not aware of was that his participation in those activities was the consequence of all that negative meditation towards him. And also the people that he robbed together with others also contributed to it. After he was sent to prison, people felt validated in their negative thinking towards Henry. So when Henry was out of jail, because look, before, when Henry was hanging around the wrong crowds, they were into visiting fortune tellers. Henry joined them. So Henry knew that the paranormal was involved in his case. So Henry didn't knew what people contributed against him. He just wanted to be delivered, real delivered, and Henry got delivered. So all those people, all those stakeholders of the stronghold, well, they were now forced to move on. Not move on in a sense they continue as things were, as usual, but to really move on. Because they now began to realize that fighting against Henry is not going to benefit them, but to give up their validation against their validation at the expense of Henry. They didn't want to do that either. So yes, Henry was delivered now, but Henry, on a regular basis, he had headaches, strong headaches. Yes, Henry was delivered, but being delivered doesn't mean that there won't be any attacks anymore. So Henry, on a regular basis, had, let's say, he had to perform what they call spiritual warfare. He needed to grow in faith. He needed to grow in operating in righteousness. Now look, Henry was a perpetrator, but his perpetration, I'm not sure if that's an English word, but his acting out in the criminal world was not just because of him. There were a lot of people that contributed to it, but Henry now wanted to be free. Even if it was Henry that contributed himself by participating in criminality, that does not take away the contribution of others. Now, Henry acknowledged his contribution and he's delivered now. Others who want to admit their contribution, they have the pride that they are law-abiding citizens in all of that. And those people, they are now fighting against Henry. And Henry is not aware of it, but he senses the headaches. That is his alarm system of his soul that is translating the danger his soul is sensing into physical discomfort. Now look, when you look at this from the bigger picture, from the wider picture, Henry was the victim here that began to victimize others. And the thing is, Henry wasn't even aware that he was being drawn into the criminal world like that. He was active, he did participate, but he wasn't really aware of what's going on. So who were the real perpetrators here? Well, first of all, his parents and everyone that continued in the accusation of his parents against him. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not approving what Henry did. But Henry was really the victim here. And this is what you need to understand. When the victim is delivered, the victimizers are going after the delivered victim to put him or her back in the victim category. Why? Because, well, let me say it like this. People really don't want to give up self-validation. They don't want to give up feeling good about themselves by comparing themselves against Henry. They don't want to give up the righteous indignation that they felt at the so-called disrespectful behavior of Henry. The parents who were still together did not want to admit that they had false expectations about marriage and that they used their son as an outlet of their immaturity. And there were also people in the legal system that wanted to hold something against Henry because Henry was a thug, he was a criminal because of things he did. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying here that people in the criminal world are victims. There are people who would commit crimes just to act out dissatisfaction. They are victimizers, so don't get me wrong here. But in the case of Henry, it wasn't just him being in the criminal world, there was more around it. What I'm revealing here is that the world doesn't operate black and white like you think. People in the world have a black and white thinking, that's true. But spiritually, things don't operate black and white like you expect. So, I just wanted to point that out to you. Now, those who are listening to this, probably you were never involved in the criminal world. Maybe it's just that you have a lot of financial issues, or you have health issues and you want deliverance. It doesn't really matter. Anytime you want deliverance, you will have to put up with a fight, sometimes multiple fights. And you know what? Henry realized after 15 years why he had to face so many issues after he got out of jail. He realized that the prayer of those believers worked, but Henry was not aware that he would have to. Henry was not aware of the resistance he would receive. He thought, I'm out of jail now, I'm on the right path, so people will be okay with it. He didn't look at the bigger picture. Now, for you who's listening to this, you will have to put up with a fight. With multiple fights, you will. So be prepared. I'm not telling you to be suspicious about others or to hate on others for contributing against you. No. You should walk in love towards others, but not walk in stupidity. Because listen, once you are delivered and you're moving forward, really moving forward, I'm not talking about being relieved and continuing as usual, or going from one outlet of darkness to another. When you are truly delivered and people sense a change over there, some will try to get back at you to draw you back, because they cannot benefit from you now that you are moving on. Let's say you've already moved on, and that pisses them off. Okay? So, that being said, endure until the end, as Jesus said, and be at peace.